6:03, we might as well get going. Thank you all for coming on this Labor Day weekend. Um, we don't have Labor Day in Israel. We have the 1st of May, and we stopped commemorating that day as well in this country. So I enjoy the long weekend and back to school on, I guess it's Tuesday for a lot of people. In any case, um, it's really hard to do this again to some extent. To talk about what's going on and what's not going on. It's really interesting. And I'll get to some news in a minute. That on my Facebook page, every time I post a picture from the demonstrations, I'm immediately accused of being a supporter of Hamas. I'm hurting Israel by tending the rallies for the hostages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we've gotten to at this point. That protesting for the hostages is supporting Hamas. And that's the division that somehow Prime Minister Netanyahu has managed to squeeze into this country more than anything else. The news just before I got on the air was on the latest cabinet meeting and how Netanyahu spoke for a long period of time in the meeting of how important it was to keep the coalition together so he could stay in power until the very end of the term because only he can do these miraculous things. And literally, that's what he said that would happen to the state of Israel in these last 2 years. And only he could make it come about. And only through this government could these things happen. Let's just say I don't share that view, and most Israelis don't, although some still do. But that's where we're at this point in terms of how the country is divided on some of these things and the message that he has been pushing for the longest time that only he could do. That was one of his election campaigns. No other leader but him. So there's no other leader but him, and that's what we have at the moment is no other leader but him. So where do we stand at this point? Um, the military continues to be the military we all know and successfully carries out missions. The most successful one was the one against the Houthis. I guess it was on Thursday, at which case the goal was to eliminate as much of the Houthi leadership as possible. At first, it wasn't clear what had succeeded or not succeeded. Today, the Houthis admitted it. Basically, their entire government was killed in the attack. We had wanted also to get their entire military leadership. From what I understand, we didn't quite do that. The defense minister is in critical condition, and the chief of staff, I think, got away without being harmed. But the entire civilian government of the Houthis was eliminated in one strike. The importance of that is not only the fact that that happened, it also says that we have now what we didn't have all along, which is intelligence on what's going on in the Houthis. The Houthis were never a target of Israeli intelligence before this war, and only once they began to fire at us did it stop becoming a intelligence target. Not something that's easy against a society that is not all that electronic. So a lot of the normal electronic means of intelligence gathering are more difficult. And of course, getting agents in, it's a question of probably working with the Saudis and others to get agents into the Houthis. But whatever the difficulties were at this point, we clearly have agents on the ground and electronically in the Houthi areas, and we were able to get real-time targeting information. The idea that we could attack in real time a target that's 2,000 miles away says a lot about the knowledge that we had in advance of something taking place. I mean, we had the similar situations with Iran, but when Iran, we actually had, once the war began, we had air coverage 24/7 over Iran. We do not have air coverage 24/7 over the Houthis. It's probably not worth the effort to do so. And it'll be a very big effort. Again, distance is far, and we don't have our tankers are very, very old. I think we're getting our first new tankers from the United States in about 6 months, which will give us better capabilities. Not so much well, it gives us greater capabilities because the new tankers are larger and can carry more fuel, but also more reliable. I mean, just imagine the maintenance people from the Air Force who are maintaining 50-year-old 707s, where there are no spare parts. They have to build their own spare parts, I'm sure. And they're still flying. I think I wrote at one point, I flew on some of those aircraft, not didn't fly them, I flew on them when I was in the Army, and that was almost 50 years ago. And they were already in service for a number of years. So keep that in mind. And that was after they were taken out of service and replaced, in other words, El Al replaced its 707s with 747s, and these were the planes they retired, and the Air Force and the Israel aircraft industries converted them into fuel ships or refueling ships. So that's in terms of the Houthis. They will continue firing at us. Will they stop firing if we end up with a ceasefire ever with Gaza? Probably. No guarantees. But I think Israel's learned a lesson that it can't allow the Houthis to remain in power there. The question is, what is the world willing to do? The world is paying the big price for the Houthis. The world is paying the price of the additional cost in Europe that it costs for ships to go around the Horn of Africa. And Egypt is losing about $1 billion a month in revenue because ships are not using the Suez Canal because of it. So it's not only our problem, but the minute Trump backed away from the Houthis, which he did, I guess that was about 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and said America had won, um, but he's very big at declaring victory. So we declared victory. America was no longer involved, and obviously the American abilities was much greater than ours just because it has aircraft carriers and bases close by. We have neither. So um, it makes things more complicated, and I think we'll see how we end up dealing with the Houthis over the long term. In Gaza, it's been one of those good news, bad news, I don't know, news weekends. First of all, the good news side is the bodies of two of the hostages who had been killed actually on October 7th and taken into Gaza were recovered on Friday, I guess it was, by special forces. This was a result of intelligence that were gathered from Palestinian terrorists who had been captured. And that led to the location. From what I understand, it was in a location that was difficult to get to for whatever reasons. And so special forces managed to get there and retrieve the bodies. It took a it took a few hours to identify one of the bodies. The second body, it took a day and a half or so until it could be confirmed it was who they believed it was. So that brings us to 48, the total number of hostages. 20 are believed to be alive, and another 28 believed to be dead at this point. So on some levels, that's minimally good news in the sense that um, less hostages, and since Hamas was demanding live prisoners for dead hostages, this limits their negotiations just a little bit more. But we're not negotiating. So that brings us to the main point. We are not negotiating at this point. Um, we have not answered Hamas's acceptance of the Witkoff deal, which is what the only thing Israel wanted for the longest period of time. The Witkoff deal, which originated from the Biden administration, was a result of Netanyahu's unwillingness to enter into a deal that at front included the end of the war. So instead, they came up with this Witkoff plan. Now that Hamas has accepted it, um, Netanyahu has said, no, we don't want that. We want the end of the war, and we only want the end of the war under our terms, and those terms would be basically total victory, that the Hamas would be forced to um, agree to all of our terms, terms that we don't expect the Hamas to accept, but why not ask for it? The big question people have been asking is what suddenly happened? Why are we walking away from the deal that we kept on saying we want? Why are we walking away from the deal that the army says take, that the intelligence services say take, that everybody is saying take, because at least 10 hostages would come home tomorrow, and then we can negotiate the rest, would be in the same place we are now, negotiate the rest. And there is been no clear answer. The government spokesmen have basically stuttered when asked to explain the change of position. Donna Weiss, the Channel 12 political correspondent, an hour ago presented at least a possible explanation, and that was that President Trump has made it clear he's tired of the war. He's tired about these endless negotiations. He demanded from Bibi to bring this to an end and just beat Hamas. And of course, everything is simple in today's White House. And Netanyahu said, yes, we can beat Hamas quickly. Of course, no one on this side thinks we can beat Hamas quickly. The plans that the army had were predicated on um, the million residents or refugees, or whatever you want to call them, that are currently in Gaza City moving south. There are two problems with that, three problems. One, Hamas is trying to stop them. B, these people have been moving back and forth for 2 years and are just tired of moving. And C, we haven't created an enticement great enough for them to want to move. Again, this goes back to all of our lack of planning and lack of doing. If you want people to move to a new area, then set it up, show in advance that there are comfortable tents with sewage, with running water, with electricity, with food that's available, etc., etc., etc. And then say, come here. It's all there. It's ready. It's waiting for you. We will make sure that there's, besides everything else, there'll be food there. But the accommodations are all ready and they're decent accommodations. But we don't do that. We say, we promise them they'll have a tent and food. We don't do it in advance. And let's just say our word isn't exactly golden when it comes to these things. This is something we could have done at the very beginning of the war, from the very beginning, when we tried moving populations from place to place. We could have created really safe zones, zones that we made sure that Hamas didn't enter, but we didn't. All we've done is move people north, south, and with them have moved Hamas. So we accomplished nothing in all that we did in terms of destroying Hamas, other than we killed a lot of Hamas people, don't get me wrong. Anyone who gave any sort of who fought back was killed. And of course, we managed to target all the top leadership of Hamas, something I'll get to in a minute. But we never created an alternative place for the people who we want to move to. I mean, there's an area along the beach that there's a tent city that's overcrowded, doesn't have enough sanitation and water and everything else, and we didn't really create, the UN did, but there's no space for another million people there. So again, leaving aside whether I think it's a good idea to move the people, whether it's illegal under international law, leave all those things aside. If you want to accomplish something like this, do it the right way. Create uh, a tent city that's clean and with sanitation and all those things, and say, here, come populate this beautiful, it's not going to be, but this really nice, safe, healthy place to go. And set up soup kitchens there in advance. All the things you'd want the people to want to go to, create it. All we're doing is we have it's supposed to be a carrot and a stick. Well, we have the stick. We bomb in the areas. We have the stick, get out of the areas. But our carrot is really pretty rotten. And if you want people to come, you need a really good carrot. And we've never been willing to invest in creating the sort of carrots that will get people to do that, especially after being disappointed a number of times. So in any case, Netanyahu seems to be in a rush, I guess because of Trump and because of political pressure to get this operation moving, even though the army originally said it couldn't happen before the end of October. Starting tomorrow, the reservists will start being called up. It was delayed so that they could attend the first day of school with their children. First day of school in Israel is tomorrow, September 1. So at that point, after a week or so, there'll be enough soldiers to theoretically begin this operation, but the people are still going to be in Gaza City. And it's going to be almost impossible to do this operation with people occupying, being in the city. And it's a very difficult operation too, because the tunnels in Gaza City are mostly intact. A lot of high story buildings, 20, 25-story buildings exist there. Uh, this is not going to be a simple operation. It's not going to be, you know, bang and it's done and it'll be done in a week. Yeah, we could send tanks into any street in Gaza. Okay, very nice. But we can't actually deal with Hamas without doing it in a very systematic, slow way. And of course, on top of everything else, there are no doubt hostages there. and either we'll accidentally kill them or Hamas will kill them. And so it's very hard to deal with that. This is the 1 year anniversary when the hostages that were in Rafiah were killed, the six hostages um, that were killed. I should say, and the Israeli television just showed this, of course, that right before that happened, there was a deal on the table, and the deal on the table was for a ceasefire and the release of hostages. Then all of a sudden, Netanyahu added a requirement during this ceasefire that Israeli troops remain on the Philadelphia corridor against the advice of the army, against the advice of all the negotiators, and Hamas rejected it back then, and the war went on, and the six hostages were killed by Hamas. Yes, we got a deal in January, a similar deal, and we stayed on the Philadelphia corridor, but it's 4 months later. I'm not sure exactly how many soldiers died during that period, probably about 80 or 90, and on top of which those hostages and probably others died. Was it worth it to stay on the Philadelphia corridor for those 6 weeks of the ceasefire? That's a different question. But that's what the result was. And so right now we're a stalemate because we're not negotiating. We have no idea whether any more hostages are dying in the tunnels. We saw um, the videos from, I guess it's been 3 weeks now, maybe 3 weeks. They were not in exactly healthy condition back then, the ones we saw. There's no reason to think they're any better now, and there's no reason to think that the rest of the hostages aren't in similar condition. So it's very difficult. And of course, the families and everybody else are frustrated because everyone demonstrates and turns out, and whether it's 30,000 or 40,000 on the average Motzei Shabbat Saturday night, or it's 200,000 or 400,000 on special days, it's ignored completely. And so very, very difficult for most Israelis to deal with. The majority of Israelis want to bring this to an end. There is no Israeli who doesn't want Hamas to be gone. It's really just a question of, are we willing to pay the price of another couple of years of war in order to get them gone? And on top of everything else, are we willing to pay the price in terms of international relations and what it's doing to our international relations at this point, um, all over the world? And we saw from the latest polls, I'll put them in tonight's update, where yes, the majority of Americans still support Israel, but the young people certainly don't at this point. The young people support Hamas across the board. And on top of which, the majority of Americans think there is hunger in Gaza. The majority blame Hamas, but also blame Israel. And that won't get any better in the coming weeks with pictures that'll come out of Gaza of the warfare that'll take place that will no doubt take civilian lives, and a fair number of them. One of the issues at the beginning of this war, most Israelis, including myself, to be honest, was not particularly concerned about the casualties amongst Gazan civilians. After all, we didn't start this war. Urban warfare is terrible. They decided to fight this war from inside of urban settings. And so people unfortunately died more than we would like. We can argue back and forth whether it's more or less, and it probably was less than what happened to the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan and Britain and different places, but we're none of those places. We're this little country at the end of the Mediterranean who depends on the world. And none of those took place in the age of TikTok and the age where every single person has a phone to film every single thing that takes place. I don't know what would have happened in World War II if everyone was running around with smartphones. I'm fairly sure there wouldn't have been a Holocaust, and I'm fairly sure other things would have been very different. But again, alternative histories is not worth doing, at least at this point. So, but we are where we are, and every day that the war goes on the way it is, it does not help us in the world. Let's put it that way. There are Israelis that say, well, what do we care about the war world? But the reality is those people who say, what do we care about this world, are not responsible for Israel's relations. They're not in the businesses of high tech and everything else that depend on the world and that are involved deep into the world economy. They're sitting, most of them, in their settlements in the West Bank, Yehuda v'Shomron, uh, in government jobs, and have guaranteed salaries from government jobs that they have. None of them have to worry about whether their high-tech company or their other company is going to make it or not make it, or what the sales are going to be this month, and all those things that people in the real world have to worry about. Okay, a couple of other things. Number one, we're talking about successful operations. Um, we had another successful operation last night when we had killed Abu Zaida, who was the spokesperson for Hamas, very public figure, public-facing person, although he always covered his face. We but he is considered was well known throughout the world, speaking on behalf of Hamas. How much he was directing Hamas's worldwide media campaigns is not totally clear, but he had a large part of that, and he was clearly one of the last leadership members of Hamas still in the Gaza Strip. There's really just one person left who would be considered leadership in the Gaza, and then all the rest of them are in Doha. And at some point, they will all no longer be with us, but we'll leave that part aside and someone else's responsibility. Um, but um, so we've killed another top person. Does it make a difference? I don't know. You can always make the argument, and maybe it's true that at some point it all crumbles in terms of the Hamas. That maybe it all breaks down. Maybe might happen, but it hasn't until now. And so we are going to be reaching very quickly before we turn around the 2-year mark of this war. And the question is, what we haven't accomplished in 2 years, will we be able to accomplish in 2.5 years? And that's a serious question. And despite Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech at the cabinet of the wonders that this government has done, most Israelis would not agree with him. Um, we had another casualty also yesterday in Gaza, a really freak accident caused when a soldier was in a convoy and another soldier in a emplacement accidentally fired his weapon, and that weapon accidentally hit the bullet accidentally hit this other soldier and killed him. Beyond freak in terms of, but the end result was the soldier is dead, and he was number 900 who have died since this war began. It's a large number, and the number is smaller than it really is. What do I mean by that? The number of wounded is very high. And one of the, I'll call it positive elements of this war is we're able to save an incredibly high percentage of soldiers that in previous wars would have died on the battlefield. Within minutes, they get attended to in the field, usually by a doctor. And within 10 or 15 minutes, they're already in a helicopter heading towards an Israeli hospital. And on board the helicopter are basically an operating room. All the equipment you have in an operating room is aboard that helicopter, and including a trauma surgeon who's on that helicopter. And as a result of that, soldiers who in any previous war would have died survive. Of course, many of them have lost legs and arms and everything else like that. And we're starting to see it just around the city. You start seeing more and more people who are missing limbs, and young people, obviously. And that's a consequence of the war. It's a semi-positive consequence in the sense that in a previous war they would be dead, but it's a heavy price that they're going to pay for the rest of their lives, obviously. And of course, the society is going to pay in terms of maintaining them and paying for them for many, many years, which, it's a price we have to pay, obviously. It's not a question. So that continues. And the question is, are we about to start the serious action in Gaza? Like I said, theoretically, the army will be ready within a week. We'll see where that goes. The army still opposes it, totally opposes it. On one or two other fronts, we attacked again in southern Lebanon today. The Lebanese army seems to be taking seriously the idea of collecting the arms from armed groups in Lebanon. The Palestinians in Lebanon are giving up their arms. They've had arms since way back when, since the 70s, when some of them didn't leave. And they're being collected by the Lebanese army successfully. What will happen when it comes down to a a push and shove with Hezbollah. We'll have to see. Hezbollah says it won't give up its arms. The Lebanese government says they have to give up their arms. Um, at the moment, it's a bit of a standoff to some extent with the Lebanese government pushing hard or as much as they can. Um, I guess that's about it. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm sure I didn't cover topics. I didn't cover any domestic topics today. So if you have any questions in that direction, please feel free to. And so ask some questions, please. Just raise your hands. Amy, I guess there's an Amy waving, I've been told. I sort of saw that too. So Amy, if you have a question. No, I guess
We
not.
go. Okay.
Okay,
Hi there. How are you?
good.
So I'm in Israel, which I think you know, and um, there's been so much like little conversation about Iran now that I'm here that I don't want to say that I don't hear when I'm in New York, but everyone keeps asking me my thoughts about Iran, and so I'm asking you your thoughts about Iran.
Okay, so that's okay. My thoughts about Iran are not simple because number one, we don't know a lot. So number one, we're still not sure exactly how much damage was done to their nuclear facilities. That's an unknown. We know a lot of damage was done. The question is, what do they want and what can they do? So number one, the Europeans have now brought back snapbacks. Snapback brings back additional economic sanctions on Iran. It's called snapback because they can't be vetoed by Russia and China. So it's automatic. On the other hand, many of the sanctions already exist because the United States single-handedly imposed a lot of those sanctions. So there will be additional economic pain to Iran if the snapback goes into effect. It takes 30 days for them to go in effect. So it's 30 days for the Iranians to negotiate. If I was the Iranians, I would start negotiating and try to delay, delay, delay. But the Iranians seem to be a little bit obsessed with their national honor these days. So far, they have not been engaging in any serious negotiations to delay that. There is a sense that we will have to have a second round with Iran. I don't know. Um, there are some people saying Israel's going to attack soon. I don't know that either. I don't think so. I think Israel certainly want, I mean, I have no idea what our rate of building interceptors are, but obviously we used a lot of interceptors in the first part of the war. And so I would think that before we got involved in a second stage of this war, we'd want to um, have more interceptors available. The United States went through almost all of its THAADs that it has. I think it went through a quarter of the THAADs it has in the whole world during our war with Iran. And THAADs are expensive and take a long time to produce. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that they went through a 3-year production cycle of THAADs during this war. So one thing we do know is we need a lot more than what was thought for all these things. Number two, I'm sure we're also waiting for our laser systems to be deployed. The lasers are primarily for smaller things, for drones, for short range missiles, etc. However, I'm fairly sure that we're working on stage 2 and 3 of these lasers, and those will be able to do things much larger and will be airborne, and might even be able to be used on a offensive basis. So if I'm an Israeli military um, planner, I'm going to wait for the lasers to be available. Again, I've been a person who's been hopeful about the lasers from the very beginning. Not everybody shares my optimism, but I've been optimistic. So, you know, I I'm the person who was when I was 15 said Israel needs a force field around the country. I was a Star Trek person, so I'm still looking for something equivalent to a force field that'll solve all of our problems. Um, so that's, we don't know what's going to be with Iran, to be quite honest. I'm not worried about anything happening immediately. It seems very unlikely anything's about to happen immediately. Iran is not prepared. We wouldn't want to, but we have to always be ready. At every given time. Look, we get these warnings for the Houthi missile launches. Probably two, three times a week they affect the Tel Aviv area. Sometimes it goes a whole week without it, but two, three times on average. The first question is it from Iran or is it from somewhere else? If it's, I mean, is it from the Houthis, excuse me, or is it from someone else? The minute it's from Yemen, we all breathe a sigh of relief. Most of us go to the shelters because just because it's from Yemen, one missile can still do a lot of damage if it gets through. And as we've seen, out of 10 missiles they fire, one is likely to get through. So you don't want to play the odds to go into the shelter. But on the other hand, it does mean there's only one being fired at any given time. So your odds are a lot better than when Iran fires 50 missiles, and we know that five of them are likely to hit. So that's always a concern. Look, it's always a concern these days. I still go to sleep at night with my sandals at the edge of my bed, ready to be put on instantly, and a pair of shorts, ready to put it right on and head to the shelter. So that's a way of life to some extent, which is not normal. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'll give it another minute, and if not, we'll end early today. No more questions. That's good. I'm glad I've answered everything everyone wants to know. Um, okay, so if nobody has any questions, I will thank you all. Um, and I hope you keep on listening to the podcasts and joining me. So thank you all for coming today and have a wonderful 2 weeks at least. Take care.